India is some like country, USA, UK, which is very going well, and people are not poor, and they are helping Pakistan and something like that. In other hand, to involve Pakistan in terrorist activities, like you said, that ISI is doing something. Sir, my question is that it is very much clear that India is involved in Balochistan and in other parts of Pakistan to spread lawlessness and terror. Sir, Raw is the major contributor as per the information which is given from the different parts. So I just ask that what you say about this terrorism which is spreading in Pakistan through India. Thanks.
Hello sir, my name is Zaheer and I am from Qaid-e-Azam University, International Relations student. I would like to ask Mr. Shashi that if France and Britain, America and Canada, after having a hostile history, can sit together, why India and Pakistan can't sit on a cooperation table? And my basic question is that how we can make SAARC more effective to make our subcontinent more progressive region in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you all for the questions. I'll start with the two comments of Rijaz and Simzera, and then go on to in the order in which we heard them. I must say I agree entirely with Rijaz that there are, if you like, conflicting narratives which will influence each country's perception. That was indeed my point in that slightly silly story about the Track-II, was to make precisely that point, that with the same sets of information and facts, we could have different perspectives, and we must learn to acknowledge and respect the others. I felt that I would not be doing you a service if I concealed what Indians really think and say to each other in India. If I came here and just spouted bye-bye talk, it would have been a waste of my time and yours, so I spoke candidly. But equally, I'm here to listen to your own perceptions, all of yours, and I respect very much what you have to say. And I would agree entirely with Ijaz, by the way, that in Bangladesh, India did use a humanitarian situation to justify a goal that had been granted realpolitik, but it has to be accepted that the opportunity to do that was created by Pakistan's own errors in East Pakistan, what became Bangladesh. And that had that not happened, there would have been no opportunity for India to either create a Mukti Bahini or indeed conclude a successful military action. On the question you first used, you and I will have to talk more, because my point is very much a political one, that politically there is 100% commitment in India not to contemplate first use, that in no discussion of military strategy at any level of government is the use of tactical or strategic nuclear weapons contemplated as an instrument. It is only thought about as a possible riposte, which will of course be calamitous for all concerned. Similarly, on the Haji Pass and Kargil, the point is not that there was a trade-off. Of course there was, and you're quite correct about that, and therefore I'm not implying largesse. I'm making the point that India has no designs on territory Pakistan controls, because though it claims these, and I am speaking completely out of school, and my Indian government friends will certainly object to my saying this, but though it claims this territory, in practice I think most people in India would be prepared to see this as a chip that can be exchanged for an enduring settlement. But nonetheless there is a claim to it, which in practice was not adhered to very much. On Naseem Zahra, whose writings I have enjoyed and respected for a long time, I am sorry to have been a disappointment to her. I do want to stress that we can obviously bash historical narratives with each other extensively. There is no doubt that Nehru committed to a plebiscite, but he did so in the context of a UN resolution whose first operative paragraph called for a Pakistani withdrawal from those parts of Kashmir it occupied. And it was Pakistan's failure to do so that then made the plebiscite essentially in Indian eyes no longer relevant or practical. And there is some very strong ground to believe, and I think many Pakistanis have agreed with me on this in the past, that in 1948 it was far from given that a plebiscite would have actually accorded Kashmir to Pakistan, particularly given the given the support of Sheikh Abdullah in the National Conference for the Indian position and not the position of Pakistan in 47-48. But we shouldn't, I think, that history around anymore. It exists. We have conflicting narratives what we need to focus on today and tomorrow. And then I welcome the reference to non-tariff barriers, because this is a problem that I'm afraid is not Pakistan specific. Non-tariff barriers are something that relatively free trade inclined people like myself have been arguing against in India in Indian context. We are unduly restrictive, and other countries have complained just as much as Pakistan. But they're not Pakistan specific, and if MFN means giving to one country the same treatment that it gives to the most favored nations it trades with, Pakistan enjoys that or fails to enjoy it in equal measure, which is not much to be said, but it's true. Similarly, I gave a few examples of Indian large-heartedness simply to counter the narrative that denies these things. I mean, the flood aid is the right thing for a concerned neighbor to do. I don't think we should claim any special credit for it. But we mention it because it was done. It was treated rather churlishly to begin with. And that ungraciousness does hurt. I mean, as an MP, I know what was being said by many parliamentarians about why this. You know, there's a questioner who said that I implied India didn't have poor people. Far from it. We have far more poor people than you have. And we have far more poor people, I'm afraid, in numbers as well as in percentage of our population that we have to be concerned about. But nonetheless, humanitarian assistance in time when a neighbour is in distress is the right thing to do, and had it come to a vote in Parliament, I would have voted for it. But I'm just saying that there is no sense of doing so because we are less poor than you. We are doing so because it's the right thing to do, and I think that is the spirit in which I wanted to convey it. I want to echo Nasim Zera's point that India should no longer be smug and Pakistan should no longer be devious. Couldn't have been put better. We do need more action on interstate cooperation. Finger pointing, I'm afraid, was pointing at the specific obstacles in the path of that cooperation from an Indian perspective. If those obstacles don't exist or are, as you suggest, fictional, no one will be more relieved than myself and than others in my camp who want to see more cooperation. But sadly, fictional institutions don't blow up hotels in Mumbai, don't kill people in our railway stations, don't conduct acts of terrorism, including here in Pakistan. There are elements that are an obstacle. And by referring to them, I'm not sure that one should really be speaking of finger pointing. One should, in fact, be confronting a reality that will have to be overcome if peace is to be really accomplished. And then on the point on Siachen, which I think is very much worth making, I am one of those within the Indian political space who has called for a peace settlement in Siachen. I think as an Indian, I would say that many of us who advocate something along the lines of Ambassador Ashraf, I believe it is, suggested that we should make it a zone of peace that neither army occupies. Many of us feel the same way in India. But it has to be accepted that sadly the hardening of the Indian position on non-withdrawal, even though our soldiers suffer exactly as much as your soldiers suffer from hypothermia and frostbite and all the horrors of maintaining a presence at that altitude. The only reason for the hardening of that position sadly was Kargil and its aftermath. And it's a pity, but there is a sense that any unilateral withdrawal from anywhere by Indian soldiers will be taken advantage of. As I said in my remarks, trust has to be built. And I'm confident that when trust is built, this will be one of the problems that can very quickly and easily be solved. And I'm glad it's one of the 7 tables in the comprehensive dialogue process that was interrupted by the United States. On the other question about India's involvement in spreading lawlessness and terror, I want to assure you, and I speak as somebody who was briefly in government but who's very active in public policy in India, that there is nobody in India with either the interest or the capacity to spread lawlessness and terror in Pakistan. None whatsoever. And I've had the benefit of some classified briefings as well. India has a profound conviction at the topmost levels of government that we need a stable Pakistan. That stability, prosperity, peace in Pakistan is in our interest. So even if we had the capacity, which frankly many of us who are not in the uniformed and cloak and dagger side of our government, many of us doubt we have the capacity, but even if we had the capacity, there is no political desire to use such a capacity negatively against Pakistan, because our desire is to see Pakistan overcome the problems it's currently facing with militancy. So I assure you, that whether in Balochistan or anywhere else, and one of the reasons that our Prime Minister mentioned in Sharm el-Sheikh, let's talk about Balochistan if we want to, is precisely because of his 100% conviction that we have nothing to hide there and nothing to be ashamed of. We do not want to play the particular game that some elements are trying to play in our territory, in our country. It's simply not in our interest to do so. Whereas there may be someone in Pakistan who believe that destabilizing India, undermining India, undercutting its economic growth, whatever, is good for Pakistan. There is no one in India of any serious responsible position who thinks that undermining Pakistan is in our interest. We are convinced that if we actually do anything to undermine Pakistan, the consequences and horrors that will be visited upon us will be far worse than if you have a stable Pakistan, whether civilian rule or military. And I want to make that very clear because it's a very deeply held conviction at the highest levels of the Indian government. And finally, on the young student who spoke about France and Germany, I couldn't agree with you more. I tried to offer some ideas, and I know there are many, many more ideas available for areas where we can talk. The comprehensive dialogue focuses on things which are also thorny issues that will take more time. But there are some, what the Americans like to call low-hanging fruit, things that you can pluck very quickly. Siachen may turn out to be one of them. Sir Creek, Mullah Barrage, there are issues which have been difficult, but the difficulties are, can be overcome with some trust and good faith. There are some things which are very easy to do. I've talked about agricultural cooperation, more free trade in agricultural goods but also other goods, more exchanges of people, liberalization of visas. I think all of these will make for a very, very positive start that will in turn change the atmosphere, the environment within which the tougher, thornier issues have to be discussed. And I think you're quite right in saying France and Germany have been at loggerheads for centuries. We've only had 60 years of conflict to worry about. We should be able to overcome it.
Thank you very much. I just want to emphasize, my name is Malia Hussain. I work as a freelance development consultant. I used to be in the Pakistan Foreign Service at one time. Lest you go away with the wrong impression, Dr. Tharoor, I wanted to reiterate that there are a lot of people in Pakistan who completely identify with what you've said today. I'm one of them. And I feel that we in Pakistan, we are victims of terrorism, and we are also at the same time extremely embarrassed by what happens in Pakistan. And perhaps that's something that a lot of countries don't realize, that when our military and when our ISI go out and misbehave, we are equally embarrassed, and we have been victims of that far more than any country has been. And I wish that our intellectuals, our media, and people in the Jinnah Institute, that we could be bigger than ourselves and forget about these little incidents that people quote, whether it's, a lot of people have quoted specific incidents. But I think that if we are to embark on the path of cooperation and reconciliation, we've got to stop focusing on these petty issues and move ahead. And just like, a couple which is trying to reconcile, we've got to be bigger than that and take a look at our interests. So I just wanted to reiterate that I completely agree with what you've said and really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
My name is Shashi Tharoor. I'm a retired military man. Dr. Tharoor, I heard about you, and I also once heard a few years back the Marriott. The two presentations on that day and today could not have been the same, not in a similar way. That time you came here because you were going to contest about the Secretary Generalship of the United Nations, and Pakistan, I'm sure, probably wanted to vote for you, and I don't know what happened. But today, of course, it's a different ballgame. Your narrative is absolutely authentic. I've heard it so many times from across the border. So there's no problem there. I'm not going to give you a counter-narrative. The wars of narrative are not to be fought here. I was also not going to put any blames on anyone. I don't even give advice to anyone because the governments do not wait for advice. I'll just, as an old soldier, give you a hard-nosed assessment of how things happen on the ground. Peace may be a desire of everyone, but it also has a price to pay. If war has a price, the peace has a price, and people, the countries who are involved in these processes keep on paying that price if they think that they have to pay. In case of India and Pakistan, the need for Pakistan to have peace because of our internal situation, because of our problem with the Western borders, etc., is much more. And that may be one problem, because that price that we may be prepared to pay, because you keep asking us to make the first gesture, is not the first time. India does not believe that it has to pay the price for peace, because it can afford the present situation much better. Give you the present example. It's not only the MFN. During the last 1 year, a big exercise on our eastern borders went absolutely unnoticed. Helicopter returned to time. Green signal given to India to go in Istanbul, to Istanbul. All those gestures happened. If there is none from the other side so far that one can see in substantial terms, I think I understand it. Because the consensus in India, and it's cross-institutional, is made out, we do not have to do anything because Pakistanis cannot afford to pay the border cards. Now, your comment on this will be highly appreciated because you are, in that business looking at the bigger picture. But just one last word on the bigger picture. The regional situation is changing, and there Pakistan is a part of it. Istanbul is the example. Russia, China, Iran, Pakistan, on the same page as far as the new Great Game in Central Asia is concerned. India kept quiet. I do not know if it is because it was the first time, or because you are so sensitive about your relationship with the United States. You didn't want to do anything to make them unhappy.
Good afternoon. I'm Hadi Subinan from BTV News. Sir, when you introduced yourself and when you were done with the introduction, I was really hoping for something. But when you spoke about 9/11 and then obviously Mumbai attacks, I was hoping that you would talk about Salala checkpost, and you would also talk about Kashmiris who are still being beaten as animals are. And I don't think even animals are beaten that way. So I'm a little disappointed that when we talk about 26/11, I would mention here that that is the same date as Salala checkpost was attacked. So why are we still talking about Mumbai attacks, and then we're talking about 9/11, we're talking about Pakistanis or Muslims being involved in all the terrorist attacks. And at the same time, we are facing terrorism and we're being the victims as well. So are we different human beings? Do we die a different death? Is that why you don't talk about Salala checkpost and Kashmiris? Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Tharoor, this is Mohit Zara, I'm a broadcaster. I'm very glad that you took up a very robust position because this is how we can actually talk at least. I just have to point out something while talking about Kashmir and plebiscite. You mentioned, you quoted a comment who said that the results of the plebiscite would have been probably different than what Pakistanis expect. I'll remind you the book Stanley Walport's biography of Nehru, in which a very credible author, he produces the conversation and the diary notes from Pandit Nehru and between Jawaharlal and Sheikh Abdullah. And at one point in the early 50s, Sheikh Abdullah writes him a letter. In those days, people didn't used to have emails, they used to write letters, so they're on record. So Abdullah writes to Nehru, says, I'm very apprehensive if the plebiscite takes place. And then Nehru writes back to him, don't worry, the plebiscite will probably not take place. Thank you.
My name is Faisal. I just have a quick question. If as a Pakistani I am to accept your argument of moral equivalence, of not having a moral equivalence, when India was attacked by Pakistanis from Pakistan, and will you also accept the argument or would you accept the moral equivalence if I were to tell you that India is training and sending people across the border to attack people in Balochistan? I mean, do you see any moral equivalence there?
Last question. I'm sorry, we are running out of time.
My name is Simran Khan and I work at the Institute of Strategic Studies, Islamabad. Mr. Tharoor, I think a great presentation, of course. And what I have an issue with, it was full of really very vivid kind of imagery about 9/11, the whole war on terror framework. And I think by now, at the end of that decade, we are coming to the